Alright, so today's lesson is on trig functions. We're looking at what the sine graph and the cosine graph looks like and what the equation of the sine and cosine actually tells us. Alright, so first off, the sine function. The sine function looks something like that. Looks like an upside down S. Alright, what I just drew, this upside down like reversed S looking shape, is one cycle. Alright, one complete cycle equals 360. Alright, so in this case, it goes from here to here. That's one period, and usually in original sine graph or sine equation, it goes from 0 to 360. Right? The amplitude is how far it goes up and how far it goes down from the center line. And this is center line right now. This went up 1, and then it goes down -1. All right. So what I just drew is one cycle, one period. When they tell you that the period is 360. That means one cycle ends at 360, right? So we can draw the opposite way, the other side, and it will look something like that, and this goes to -360, all right? The cosine graph looks something different. Notice over here we started at 0. The cosine graph starts at 1 and goes down and looks like a U, kind of, like a parabola almost, all right? And again, this is one cycle, this is one period. So it goes from 0 to 360. All right. We can do the same thing on the other side and look something like that. All right. So these are the two graphs that you're going to be working with today. What we're going to do is look at the different equations that the sine has and different equations that the cosine has, and see what those numbers actually tell you. All right. So first off, we're looking at the sine graph. All right. So we have y equals a sine of parentheses bx plus c parentheses plus the d. All right. The a value tells us how far the graph goes up and how far it goes down. It's like the amplitude, all right, and it should tell you how far it goes a units from d, not c. Sorry. So change that to d. All right. The b, it tells you what the period is. So you remember when I drew that one cycle? All right. That's your period. This tells you where this number ends. All right. So in this case, you take 360 and you divide it by whatever b number you have, all right, and that's going to give us a period. C moves the graph left or right, all right, so it shifts it left or right, and you'll see an example later on. D is our center line. So remember, sine graph looks something like that, and this one looks something like that, all right. It always goes from 0 to 360. All right, originally, and it goes up 1 and down -1, and now all of this, the amplitude, the period, all that changes when you add these numbers in. All right, so let's look at an example. So in this example, we have y equals 2 sine of x minus 1. All right, so before we even draw anything, let's just write down what each of these numbers mean. So -1 equals the center line. All right, and if you look back, that was our d value. So -1 is our center, so I'm going to go down to -1, say right about here, and draw a dotted line noting that this is our center line. All right, so it's kind of hard to do on the smartboard thing, but all right, so it's a dotted line going through -1. All right, let me see, -1. Hopefully you guys can see that. All right, the amplitude a. All right, this tells us how far it goes up from the center line. All right, so from here we go up 2. So 1, 2, that's 1, and then from -1 we go -2, -3. That's the other one. So there are, let's say, our high point, our high y value is equal to 1. Our low y value is equal to -3. Hopefully you guys see this. This is kind of like your ceiling. You can't go above the ceiling, and this is your floor. You can't go up below the floor. All right, so your graph is going to go in between these two dotted lines. All right, so it's a sine graph. We know that the sine graph looks like an upside down reversed S. So it goes up, goes down, and goes like that, right? It doesn't have to be perfect, but it looks like something like that. Notice that there isn't a b value or a number in front of the x, so we know that this goes from 0, and let's write it up here because this is where the x-axis is, to 360. All right, from 0 to 360, y, the b value here, b equals 1. So if we took our equation 360 divided by 1, it's just 360. That's one period, that's one cycle, so we know that this one cycle goes from 0 to 360. All right. So unless they tell you otherwise, draw the other side as well. So something like that. And this is negative 360. All right. So this is your sine graph. I know it's ugly here, but you guys can draw it better. And if anything, you can always compare this to plugging it into the calculator. All right. Let's look at one more example before we get to the code. All right. So our next one is y equals 4 sine of 2x minus 3. All right, so let's look at the negative 3 first. This is going to be our center line. So y equals negative 3 is our center line. So let's do that real quick. 1, 2, 3. This is going to be the center line. This is where we're going to begin. All right. The high point, and again, it's always the a value, right? So the high point from the center is 4, right? So 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then from here 1, 2, 3, and 4. So from negative 3, negative 4, negative 5, negative 6, negative 7 to 1 is basically our interval. So our high point is at y equals 1, our low point is at y equals negative 7, and then our period, we take the b value, which is 2 this time. So we take 360 divided by 2, and that's 180. All right. So let's draw our ceiling first. So at 1, there's a ceiling. We can't go past that. And at 7 or negative 7, there's a floor, so we can't go past that. So again, we're looking at the sign, so it looks like an S. Let's just draw our S. Looks something like this. Goes up to the ceiling, goes down to the floor, and then back to the middle. All right. So now, one thing I want you to note that our period now is 180, right? So now we know that this is going to go from 0 and end at 180, right? So if we're doing the same thing to the other side, we can do something like that. And if this graph was longer, this will go from 0 to negative 360, all right? So that's it. That's all you need to know. Again, they won't straight up ask you what does this graph look like. They'll give you a graph. They might ask you what is the a value, the b value, the c, or the d value. All right. Let's look at the cosine graph. All right, the cosine graph, basically the same thing. And again, change this to d. But the cosine graphs, this is your a value. This is your negative a value. This is your d value. It goes and looks something like that. All right. Same thing on the other side, something like that. The only difference is the way it looks, but everything else it tells you the exact same thing. How far it goes up, how far it goes right, how far the period is. It tells you the exact same thing. All right. So let's look at an example. So let's look at this example right here. We have y equals 3 cos of 0.5x minus 1. All right, so cos of 0.5x minus 1. Notice that I also did say that it goes from 0 to 360. So let's look at the different values first. We have negative 1. So remember, d is negative 1. That gives us our center line, right? Our center line, this is where we're going to start. So negative 1, let's draw our center line. This is negative 1. And just draw a dot going across. All right. Wow, missed that. All right, so that whole thing is negative 1. Sorry. 3 is our amplitude. That's going up 3 and down 3 from negative 1. So 1, 2, 3. That goes to 2. And then negative 1, 1, 2, and 3. That goes to negative 4, sorry. All right, negative 4. So it goes up 3, goes down 3, negative 4, 2. Our high point is going to be y equals negative 2. Our low, y equals negative 4. All right, so we have a ceiling here, and hopefully I can match it. There we go. and then we have a floor over here. God, it's so ugly. All right, anyways, our cosine looks something like a U. So starting at the ceiling point, we're going to go down and make this U, kind of like a parabola. All right, this goes from here to here, looks something like that. All right, so the last thing we need to do is look at our B value. Our B value is 0.5, so let's take 360 divided by 0.5, and that gives us 720. All right, so that means it starts at 0 and it goes all the way to here. This is one cycle, so this is 720. But this tells us we only want it from 0 to 360, right? So half of 720 is right here. This is 360. So what they really want is basically this right here, this region from here to here to here to here. They only want this graph right here. This is basically your answer. Only this right here is what the x value does. From 0 to 360, this is your graph. All right. So be careful of this thing right here, because this is your limitations, this is your interval, this is your domain. They only want it from 0 to 360. So even though you drew all this, they only really want the graph that's in this picture right here, in this box. All right, so be careful. So that was basically the notes on sine and cosine. If you need to, go back and rewatch it. This is a question that you guys will see on the IB exams, something like this. They'll give you the formula up here, all right, and then they'll ask you, find A, B, and C. And depending on what the formula looks like, so like in this case, in all of our equations, we had a D, right? This is the same thing as your D. They just noted it differently, all right? Look at this, take a look at this, try this at home, and then we'll go over that in class and then go over some of the Trig functions, all right? All right, that's it.